Hey, what is going on, guys? OG Mode Season 2 has been out for about 2 weeks now, and when it first launched, there were a lot of balance changes to most of the weapons that resulted in some very strange changes. Some of them I think were overall good, but some of them just didn't make a lot of sense. For example, the pump was nerfed in base damage, headshot damage, wall damage, and range, which took it from being a really amazing gun to still being solid, but just it didn't feel anywhere near as good to play with. The good news is they did revert some of these changes with the balance update. However, now that it's been more than 2 weeks, I don't suspect that they're going to change it anymore. It's possible they could, but if they were urgently going to fix these issues, I think it would have already happened. So we'll talk about the changes of the pump, tac shotgun, scoped AR, and RPG as they've been partially adjusted but not fully, and then we'll do a reminder on a lot of the weapons that are still lying around that have strange changes to them. Okay, let's start out with the pump shotgun. So the pump shotgun still does 92 damage for gray green, which is the chapter 2 season 6 stats. Very strange they chose those stats, but okay. The good news though is there's no headshot cap, so you can do 210 headshot with the gray and 230 with the green, so that's a 2.5x headshot multiplier. Overall, it's great that you can one pump because that's how the pumps were historically. Honestly, the damage change doesn't matter all that much. Yes, the gray got nerfed by 6 damage and the green by 3, but I don't think that's particularly relevant in most cases and you shouldn't worry about it too much. What is a more noticeable nerf though is that the wall damage is still around 50 and it still has a 6 tile range, which means that, well, you can't use it as far and you can't blast through walls. And the blasting through walls part I think was important because previously with double hump you could just one shot freshly built wood or brick walls since it did 100 wall damage. Now you can't one shot any freshly built structure of really any type, even stairs or cones, not going to work. So do keep that in mind. In terms of the pump shotgun's overall strength nowadays, I'd still say it's a solid weapon. I mean, being able to double pump and hit one shots is still going to be powerful. However, it's definitely taken a step down. So it's still a strong, solid option that I recommend, but it's not a weapon that's incredibly powerful like it was in Season 1. I know some people were arguing that the pump was too good in Season 1. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. You could argue it's more balanced now, but I don't think they balanced it in the way I would have hoped. I would have preferred a draw speed nerf over this nerfing strategy, but I guess it's one way to do it. Let's move on to the tac shotgun. So the tac shotgun also got its headshot multiplier fixed, so it's 2.5x with no headshot cap. The base damage did not get adjusted randomly when Season 2 came out, so it's still 67, 70, 74. It also has a 6 tile range and does about 50 wall damage, except, okay, this is important, the purple variant actually does 75 wall damage, which is actually a buff compared to Season 1 when the best tac could only do 70 wall damage. How did that happen? I think it's because in later variants of the tac, the gray through blue did around 50 wall damage, 55-ish, but the purple and up did 75. So that's how that's happened. And what that actually means is that the purple tac is actually still really good at breaking down walls. I mean, 75 wall damage is no slouch. You can two-shot walls easily. If someone like makes a couple edits to one, you might just be able to straight up one-shot a wall. So that means the purple tac is actually a significant step up from the green and blue because of that wall damage. However, though, the green and blue got the wall damage nerf. They're not effective at breaking through walls. And that 6 tile range, I don't think affects the tac quite as much because the tac spread is so wide that if you're using it beyond 6 tiles, you're doing very little damage anyway, even with an 8 tile range, but something to keep in mind there. In terms of the tac shotgun strength, tac shotgun, it's still solid. Really, the wall damage isn't great. The 6 tile range, not amazing, but the purple one doesn't have the wall damage problem. So the tac really hasn't been nerfed that much in all honesty. And something to keep in mind is the tac previously did 70 wall damage, has gone down to around 50, 55, which is a much smaller nerf than going from 100 to 50 with the pump. So tac is still a solid option. I still think it's competitive with the pump if that's your preferred shotgun. Of course, you can't one-shot with it, but maybe, you want to run pump tac, especially if you can find that purple tac that can shred through walls. There is still a choice between the pump and tac there. Okay, now let's move on to the scoped AR. First off, the fall off should be gone with the scoped AR, which is fantastic. The scoped AR with damage fall off just makes no sense at all, and it seems to have less bloom. People have been telling me it looks like it has less bloom. When I look at it, it also looks like that to me. However, the issue is the scoped AR still has bloom, and the problem is it's hard to justify the scoped AR with bloom because the point of it is to be very accurate, long-range weapon where you have consistent damage, and bloom ensures that you don't have consistent damage. So it's not an F tier weapon anymore. It's not a joke of a weapon, but it's still not very good. Maybe C at best, maybe D. It really needs to, once it gets rid of its bloom, hopefully that'll happen in season 3, 4, whenever. That would really help make the Scope DR be more competitive. But this is a good change overall, as it takes the Scope DR from being completely unusable to at least having some use in season 2. Finally, let's move on to the RPG. It now has the correct damage, so the 127, 143 damage thing is completely gone, which is great. However, it still has more than a second reload nerf across all rarities. Now, I actually don't think this reload nerf is a bad idea. It actually is pretty much equal to the Season 7 to end of Chapter 1 reload. That's not inherently bad. And the reason why the RPG was kind of broken in Season 1, arguably, was because it had the quick reload, but the newer explosion radius mechanics. You have to remember in Season 4, the explosion radius mechanics changed to where before that patch, you needed line of sight for it to blow up a structure. So, for example, if you just fired it straight at one wall, it couldn't destroy the walls behind it. But with the update, you were able to destroy everything in the explosion radius. You did not need line of sight. So I don't think this is necessarily a terrible change. I would have preferred for it to go back to the old explosion mechanics and keep it super fast reload. But hey, I understand why they did this. But just keep in mind that the RPG reload is pretty painfully slow. Still a good weapon, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely very slow paced now. Now finally, I just want to wrap up with some reminders in case you aren't aware of all the balance changes that came into Season 2. Do remember that damage fall-off does exist on all weapons now. I don't necessarily think that's terrible. If we're going to have first shot accuracy, might as well have fall-off. Honestly, with Season 2, it should be neither, but okay, if we're going to have it this way, understandable. Do remember the Bolt Sniper has the incorrect reload on purple gold. It reloads a bit faster than it should. This is just a silly change. It makes no sense to buff the purple gold without the blue, and it's not like the Bolt Sniper was struggling. It was a solid weapon in Season 1. This was completely unnecessary. Second thing, OG SMG is much more accurate than it should be when you tap fire it. This is pretty much irrelevant. The OG SMG is not effective at range, so not the biggest deal. If you full auto spray, it still goes to its huge bloom. It's just kind of just like a whatever change. It's unnecessary, but it's not the biggest deal. The burst AR is significantly more accurate than it historically was. This I actually think is overall good, because the burst AR was not very good when it had a ton of bloom. Now it's actually okay. It's accurate enough to actually be justifiable. So cool. You might want to try out the burst AR if you haven't already. And finally, the standard AR reloads slower. Now that we're getting damage fall off on the Scar, why are we nerfing the reload? Overall, completely unnecessary. So just to conclude now, not all the changes I think are necessarily terrible. Some of them I think actually are positive, like the burst AR bloom buff. But a lot of them are just random that I just disagree with. They just don't need to exist. We don't need to nerf the shotgun range by 2 tiles. It's just very weird. Some things to keep in mind, though, is just that still a lot of the weapons are a mishmash of random stats from random seasons. But I do think this is overall a step forward compared to the launch of Season 2. And with that, I hope this video was helpful, and I'll catch you in the next one.